Jasmine Carter never believed in fairy tales. Life had taught her that happily ever afters were reserved for other people, the ones born with silver spoons, not single mothers juggling two jobs. But the night she locked eyes with Alexander Pierce, the cold, untouchable millionaire who ruled boardrooms like a king, her world tilted. She didn't know it yet, but one desperate deal was about to turn her life into the kind of story she never believed she deserved. Welcome to Mr. Roberts Stories. If you love gripping tales of love, betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, you've just found your new home. Here, every story will pull you in, make your heart race, and leave you guessing until the very last word. Now, here's the deal. Watch till the end because the best surprises are always saved for last. And if you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss another unforgettable story. Every story on Mr. Roberts Stories isn't just something you watch, it's something you feel, something that stays with you long after the video ends. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. Trust me, you're going to want to watch every second. This is Mr. Roberts Stories, where every story is an experience. The first thing Jasmine Carter learned about survival was that pride didn't pay bills. She had swallowed hers long ago, first when she had to work two jobs while her classmates went to parties, and later when she pawned the necklace her grandmother left her just to keep the electricity running in their cramped Chicago apartment. Now, pride was the last thing on her mind as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes in one hand and smoothed down the borrowed black dress with the other. The charity gala was a world she had never belonged to, crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen waterfalls, gold-trimmed walls gleaming under soft lights, and guests dripping in designer clothes and polished jewels. The men wore tailored suits worth more than her yearly rent, while the women floated in gowns that shimmered like liquid starlight. And there was Jasmine, blending into the staff, her natural curls pulled into a tight bun, her skin glowing under the soft glow of the ballroom, but her eyes constantly flicking toward her phone hidden under the serving tray. She prayed for no emergency calls. Her mother was back in the hospital again. Another round of tests, another round of bills that Jasmine could barely keep up with. She adjusted her posture, forced a polite smile, and continued circulating through the crowd of millionaires and politicians. These events always reminded her of the invisible line that separated her world from theirs, a line marked by wealth, privilege, and the kind of security she could only dream of. That was when she noticed him. Alexander Pierce. Even in a room filled with powerful men, he stood apart. He wasn't the type to command attention with noise or showy gestures. No, his presence was sharper, quieter, like a blade hidden beneath silk. Tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing gray-blue eyes that seemed to dissect everything they landed on, Alexander carried himself like someone who knew he owned the room without needing to prove it. The whispers around him floated like smoke. Self-made millionaire, real estate mogul, cold as ice. His success was legendary, his reputation merciless. Jasmine tried not to stare. She had no business staring. Men like him weren't for women like her. Besides, she had work to do. But fate had a twisted sense of humor. As she turned to avoid a cluster of laughing guests, her tray bumped into someone's arm. Champagne flutes wobbled, one tipping dangerously. Before she could steady it, a hand shot out and caught the glass with perfect precision. Her gaze traveled up, and there he was. Alexander Pierce. Close enough now that she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the expensive cut of his charcoal suit, and those storm-colored eyes fixed directly on her. "Careful," he said, his voice low, controlled, carrying an authority that sent a shiver down her spine. Heat rushed to her face. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean." "You didn't spill it. No harm done." His mouth curved, though it wasn't quite a smile. More like an observation. His gaze lingered longer than necessary, and Jasmine shifted under it, suddenly too aware of herself. The curve of her waist, the steady rise and fall of her chest, the way her skin seemed to glow against the pale crispness of his shirt. She cleared her throat and forced her professionalism back into place. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." She turned quickly, eager to disappear into the sea of guests. But Alexander Pierce wasn't a man who let things slip past him. Later that night, When she ducked into the staff corridor for a breath, she found him waiting. He leaned casually against the wall, hands in his pockets, looking like a scene from some expensive movie. Jasmine froze. "This area's for staff only." His lips twitched that almost smile again. "Then I suppose I'll call it networking." She frowned, cautious. Men like him didn't just talk to women like her, not unless they wanted something. "What do you want?" "Your name, for a start." Her instinct screamed to walk away. But something in his tone, not demanding, not dismissive, just steady, made her answer. "Jasmine." "Jasmine," he repeated, rolling the syllables slowly as though testing the weight of it. Then he tilted his head, his gaze sharper now. "You're not like the rest of the staff here. You don't belong in these hallways, carrying trays for people who don't see you. Why are you here?" The question stung, mostly because it was true. But Jasmine wasn't about to spill her entire life story to a stranger, millionaire or not. She crossed her arms. "Because I need the job. That's all." Alexander studied her for a long moment. She felt like he could see through the layers she tried to hide behind. The exhaustion in her eyes, the determination that pushed her forward, the fear she buried deep. Finally, he said, "I have a proposition for you." Her guard shot up instantly. "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard it yet. And I don't want to. Whatever this is, I'm sure it's something I should stay far away from." He chuckled softly, and the sound was unexpectedly warm. "You're smarter than most people I meet." He straightened then, his expression hardening back into that ruthless precision he wore like armor. "But listen anyway. I need someone to play a role. A fake girlfriend, to be precise. Public appearances, events, dinners. Strictly professional." Jasmine blinked at him, sure she misheard. "You want me to, you pretend to be your girlfriend?" "Yes." She stared, incredulous. "Why me? You could hire any actress, model, influencer. Because you're not any of them." His voice was final, as if that alone was reason enough. Her laughter slipped out before she could stop it. "You're insane." "Perhaps. But I'm also offering you something you need." He leaned in slightly, lowering his tone. "I'll cover your mother's medical bills. Every cent. And I'll set up a trust fund for your brother's education. In return, you sign a 6-month contract." Jasmine's breath caught. He knew. Somehow he knew. Her mouth went dry. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know things." His eyes didn't waver. "You're drowning, Jasmine. I'm throwing you a lifeline." It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward and her entire world would change. One wrong move and she'd lose herself completely. "Why me?" she whispered again, softer this time, the defiance slipping under the weight of desperation. This time, he didn't hesitate. "Because when you looked me in the eye earlier tonight, you didn't look away. Everyone else does. I need someone who won't flinch." Silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Jasmine's heart pounded. She should walk away. She should tell him no. She should hold on to the last shreds of her pride. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A new message from the hospital, pending payment required to continue treatment. Her chest tightened. Her mother. When she looked back at Alexander Pierce, she saw not just the devil in a tailored suit, but the only man offering her a way out. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Show me the contract." And just like that, Jasmine Carter's life was no longer hers alone. The pen had barely left the paper before Jasmine regretted it. Her signature sat boldly at the bottom of the crisp, white contract, binding her to Alexander Pierce for 6 long months. The ink had dried, and so had any chance of turning back. "You'll move into my penthouse tomorrow," Alexander had said in that calm, imperious tone of his, sliding the contract into a leather folder as though her life wasn't tied to it now. Appearances must be convincing. And so, by the next evening, Jasmine found herself standing in the lobby of one of Chicago's tallest glass towers, clutching a single suitcase and her nervous breath. The doorman greeted her by name, Miss Carter, as though she already belonged here. But the weight of the marble floors, the sleek, modern art on the walls, and the silence of wealth told her otherwise. This wasn't her world. It was his. The elevator whisked her up to the 50th floor. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a palace disguised as an apartment. The penthouse was vast, all clean lines and towering windows that revealed the glittering city skyline below. Every piece of furniture seemed chosen with precision, a black leather sectional, glass tables, art pieces she couldn't name. Cold, elegant, impersonal, just like the man himself. Alexander emerged from his study as she set her suitcase by the door. He wore a navy suit without a tie, his shirt collar open just enough to soften his usual severity. His gaze swept over her, not with desire, but with calculation, as though she were another asset he'd acquired. "You're late," he remarked. Her eyes narrowed. "The hospital called. I had to handle something before coming here." For a second, something flickered in his expression. Was it concern? Before the mask slid back in place. "Next time, inform me. Punctuality matters." "Right?" she muttered, folding her arms. "Because God forbid your fake girlfriend arrives 15 minutes late to her fake life." His lips quirked, again, not quite a smile. "You'll adjust." Jasmine bit back a retort. Arguing with Alexander felt like throwing punches at steel. He absorbed everything without flinching. Instead, she followed him into the living room, where a portfolio sat open on the table. Glossy magazines, photographs, even schedules were laid out with military precision. He gestured toward them. "We'll attend the Whitmore Foundation dinner this weekend. You'll wear the gown I've had delivered upstairs. Tomorrow, we'll sit for an interview with Chicago Life. The narrative is simple. We met at the gala, we've been quietly seeing each other for months, and we decided to make it public. Stick to the story." Her brows shot up. "You've planned my life down to the last detail. That's what contracts are for." She huffed. "And what about me? Don't I get a say in how I'm portrayed?" Alexander's gaze locked onto hers, sharp and unyielding. "Do you want your mother's bills paid or not?" The words sliced through her pride. She hated him for using her desperation as leverage, hated herself more for needing him. But she swallowed the anger, straightened her shoulders, and said, "Fine. I'll play your little game." The first test came sooner than expected. The Whitmore Foundation dinner was held at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the moment Jasmine stepped out of Alexander's sleek black car, camera flashes blinded her. Reporters shouted questions, lights flickered, and for a terrifying second, she froze. Then Alexander's hand slipped to the small of her back, steady and firm, guiding her forward. "Smile," he murmured near her ear. His voice was calm, commanding but lower, almost intimate. Her heart stuttered. She forced a smile, her hand slipping into his as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Together, they glided up the red carpet, looking every bit the power couple he wanted them to be. Inside, the night unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Alexander introduced her to business partners, political donors, even a senator. His words were smooth, his posture flawless, and Jasmine, despite her nerves, found herself matching his rhythm. When he wrapped an arm around her waist, she leaned in with practiced ease. When he laughed at something she said, the crowd believed it. But somewhere between the scripted gestures, something unscripted crept in. At one point, as they paused near a painting, Jasmine whispered, "I feel like I'm drowning in all this pretense." Alexander glanced down at her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Then let me be your anchor." The words stunned her, not because of what he said, but because, for the briefest moment, he meant it. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Jasmine kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the sofa. "I don't know how you do it," she muttered, massaging her sore feet. "All those fake smiles, fake conversations, it's exhausting." Alexander loosened his tie, watching her with an unreadable expression. "It's not fake for them. It's survival. Influence is built on perception. Tonight, you played your role well." She laughed without humor. "So, I'm just another investment for you?" "You're more than that." His answer came too quickly, too firmly. Her eyes widened, but before she could press, he turned away, pouring himself a drink. "Don't overthink it. You should rest. Tomorrow will be busier." But Jasmine couldn't rest. Because as much as she hated the contract, hated the coldness of his world, she couldn't deny one thing. For a few fleeting hours tonight, when he looked at her, not as an employee, not as a burden, but as though she mattered, it hadn't felt fake at all. And that scared her more than anything. The following weeks blurred into a routine of appearances, interviews, and carefully staged outings. Jasmine learned how to smile at the cameras, how to tilt her head just so, how to answer questions with enough warmth to appear genuine without revealing too much. But behind closed doors, life was anything but simple. Alexander was infuriatingly meticulous. He corrected her posture at dinners, criticized her word choice during interviews, and even sent back an entire outfit because it didn't suit the image. Jasmine gave as good as she got, snapping back with sarcasm and stubbornness. But beneath the bickering lay something else, an unspoken tension that hummed louder each day. Sometimes, she'd catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze unreadable. Other times, she'd find herself studying the hard lines of his face, wondering what it would take to make him truly smile. And at night, when the city lights spilled across the penthouse floor and silence filled the air, Jasmine found herself lying awake, wondering if 6 months would be too long, or not nearly long enough. The storm rolled in without warning. Jasmine had been standing on the balcony of Alexander's Hamptons estate when the first drops fell, soft against her skin. The sea stretched endlessly before her, restless waves pounding against the shore, the sky bruising with thunder. Within minutes, the drizzle turned to a downpour, the wind howling as though the world itself were unraveling. "Come inside," Alexander called from the doorway, his voice firm but edged with concern. Jasmine hesitated, staring out at the storm. She loved the rain. It reminded her that even nature had moments of chaos, of breaking apart before finding calm again. But the chill seeped into her bones, and she finally stepped inside. The estate was silent except for the patter of rain against the glass walls. The power flickered once, twice, before plunging the entire house into darkness. "Great," Jasmine muttered, hugging her arms. "Just when I thought this weekend couldn't get any more surreal." Alexander moved with steady composure, retrieving candles from a drawer as though even blackouts were something he controlled. He lit them one by one, golden light spilling across his sharp features, softening the hardness she had come to associate with him. "Surreal?" he asked, placing a candle on the coffee table. She shrugged, sitting cross-legged on the rug by the fireplace. "Being stuck in your mansion on a cliff while a storm rages outside? Definitely not how I pictured my life turning out. You regret signing the contract." His words were not a question, but an observation. Jasmine glanced at him, her face illuminated by the fire he'd just coaxed to life. The flickering light danced over his eyes, making them appear less like steel and more like something fragile, human. "I regret needing the contract," she admitted quietly. "If my mother weren't sick, if my brother didn't depend on me, I would have run the other way the moment you opened your mouth." Alexander leaned back against the couch, watching the flames. "Honesty. That's rare." "Don't sound so surprised," she said, forcing a laugh. "You didn't hire me for my honesty. You hired me to be pretty arm candy and smile when the cameras flash." His gaze snapped to hers. "That's not true." The intensity in his voice startled her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside raged on, thunder rolling over the sea like an untamed beast. Finally, Alexander said, almost to himself, "I hired you because you don't flinch." Jasmine's breath caught. She remembered his words from that first night at the gala. At the time, she thought it was just one of his many cryptic remarks. But now, in the hush of the storm, it sounded like something deeper. "You think I'm not afraid of you?" she asked softly. He looked at her then, truly looked, as if stripping away every layer of defense she had. "I think you're the only one who sees me. Not the name, not the money, not the empire. Me." Her chest tightened. She wanted to brush it off, make a joke, anything to deflect. But the weight of his words pinned her in place. "Alex," she whispered, the name slipping out before she realized. His expression shifted at the sound of it, surprise first, then something warmer, something dangerous. The fire crackled. The rain beat against the windows. And between them stretched a silence so charged it felt like a living thing. When his hand brushed hers, Jasmine didn't pull away. "Tell me to stop," Alexander said, his voice low, raw in a way she'd never heard before. But she couldn't. Her lips parted, her heart beat wild, and then his mouth was on hers. It wasn't like the staged kisses they had shared for the cameras. Measured, precise, empty. This was hungry, desperate, real. His lips moved against hers as though he'd been starving and only now found air. Jasmine's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. She could feel the tension in his body, the years of restraint unraveling in a single moment. And beneath it all, she felt the truth: this wasn't part of the deal. This was Alexander Pierce, stripped of control, stripped of power, stripped of everything but need. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Jasmine searched his face. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "No," he admitted, brushing his thumb against her cheek. "But I don't regret it." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What are we doing, Alex? This isn't real. It's a contract." His jaw tightened. "Does it feel like a contract?" The answer lodged in her throat, unspoken but undeniable. No, it didn't. Not anymore. The days after the storm were different. Their roles hadn't changed on paper. Jasmine was still his girlfriend for the public eye, but the air between them was charged with something new. When he held her hand now, it lingered. When he looked at her, it wasn't calculation, it was something she didn't dare name. And when they were alone, the mask slipped more often. She discovered that Alexander liked his coffee black, but with a single spoon of honey. That he hated silence while working, preferring the faint hum of classical piano in the background. That he carried an old photograph in his wallet, creased and worn, of a woman with kind eyes who she later learned was his late fiancée. One evening, as they shared dinner in the penthouse, Jasmine finally asked the question that had lingered since that night by the fire. What happened to her? He set down his glass, staring at the city lights through the window. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. Her name was Emily. We were engaged. A car accident, 5 years ago. She didn't make it. Jasmine's chest ached. "I'm sorry. I don't want your pity." His tone sharpened, but his eyes betrayed him. Loneliness. Regret. "It's not pity," she said softly. "It's empathy. There's a difference." For the first time, he didn't argue. Instead, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. And Jasmine realized that the walls Alexander Pierce had built around himself, walls no one else could climb, were slowly crumbling. But walls didn't fall without consequence. Every night she spent in his world, Jasmine felt herself slipping further. What began as survival was becoming something more, something dangerous. She knew she should protect her heart, remind herself of the contract, remind herself that this was temporary. But every time Alexander looked at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to this earth, she knew the truth. The line between pretending and reality was gone. And she was already too far in to turn back. The first headlines appeared on a Tuesday morning. Jasmine woke to the shrill vibration of her phone, groggy from another late night spent in Alexander's arms. She reached blindly for the device on the nightstand, her heart skipping when she saw the flood of notifications. Breaking news: millionaire Alexander Pierce and his girlfriend revealed. A contractual relationship? Her fingers froze. She clicked the article, her pulse hammering. Grainy photos filled the screen, her and Alexander leaving restaurants, walking into galas, sitting in his car. At first glance, they looked like any other couple in love. But then came the damning evidence, screenshots of an anonymous source claiming Jasmine had been hired to play the role of his girlfriend. 6-month deal. Monthly payments. Conditions. Her stomach dropped. Someone had leaked the truth. When Alexander entered the bedroom minutes later, already dressed in a charcoal suit, his jaw was locked tight. His phone buzzed nonstop in his hand. "You've seen it," he said. Not a question. "Yes." Her voice cracked. "They know." His eyes were steel, colder than she'd seen in weeks. "It's damage control. We'll handle it. We'll handle it." As if this were just another business negotiation. But Jasmine wasn't a merger or a press release. She was the one being branded in bold letters across every gossip site in Chicago: gold digger, fraud, con artist. Her chest constricted. Handle it? Alexander, they're tearing me apart online. Do you know what it's like to read thousands of strangers calling you a whore? For a moment, something flickered in his expression, but then the walls slammed back into place. This is temporary. The news cycle will move on. Tears burned behind her eyes. Temporary for you, maybe. You'll still be Alexander Pierce, billionaire tycoon. I'll be the girl who sold herself for money. That sticks. He took a step toward her, his voice lower now. I'll protect you. She shook her head, bitter laughter escaping her throat. You can't protect me from this. You made me a part of your world, Alex, but I was never really in it. And now I'm paying the price. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. And then Jasmine did what she swore she wouldn't do. She began to pack her things. The next 48 hours blurred into chaos. Paparazzi swarmed outside the penthouse. Online speculation exploded. Talk shows debated whether Jasmine was a clever grifter or an innocent pawn. Every headline painted her as a caricature, stripping her of dignity. She couldn't go to the hospital without being followed, couldn't step outside without cameras flashing in her face. Even her brother, Marcus, called in tears after being cornered at school by reporters. By Friday, she'd had enough. This isn't worth it, Jasmine whispered, shoving the last of her clothes into a duffel bag. Her hands trembled, her body heavy with exhaustion. My family doesn't deserve this. I don't deserve this. Alexander stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. So you're running? I'm surviving, she shot back, her voice thick with tears. It's what I've always done. You taught me that appearances are everything, remember? Well, mine is ruined. There's no fixing it. He stepped closer, his tone sharp. You think walking away will make it easier? Her throat tightened. I think it's the only choice I have. For the first time, she saw something raw in his eyes. Not anger, not control, but fear. If you walk out that door, Jasmine, he stopped, his jaw clenching as though the words were too heavy. What, Alex? She demanded, her hands shaking. If I walk out what? You'll just replace me with someone else who fits your perfect image? Someone who knows how to smile on cue. His silence was answer enough. So she left. The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday. Jasmine watched from a dingy motel room miles outside the city, curled on the edge of a worn bed, her duffel bag at her feet. The television flickered with live coverage of Alexander Pierce standing before a wall of microphones, reporters pressing forward like vultures. He looked the same as always, immaculate suit, shoulders straight, eyes sharp. But there was something different in the way he gripped the podium, as though he were holding on for dear life. A reporter shouted, Mr. Pierce, is it true your relationship with Miss Carter was contractual? The room fell silent, tension crackling through the broadcast. Alexander's jaw flexed. And then, to Jasmine's utter disbelief, he leaned into the microphone and said, yes. Gasps erupted in the crowd. Reporters shouted over one another. But Alexander raised a hand, silencing them. Yes, there was a contract, he continued, his voice steady, resolute. At first, I thought hiring someone would shield me from the messiness of real relationships. But what I didn't anticipate was that Jasmine Carter would stop being an arrangement and become the most important person in my life. Jasmine's heart stopped. The reporters roared with questions, but Alexander's voice cut through them all. You want the truth? Here it is. She saved me. From my loneliness, from myself. She's not a fraud, she's not a gold digger, she's the woman I love. And if the price of keeping her is losing everything I've built, then so be it. The room exploded, cameras flashing like lightning, but Jasmine barely heard it. She was frozen, staring at the screen as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. He had said it. Not in private, not whispered in the dark, but in front of the entire world. He had chosen her. By the time she returned to the city, the story had shifted. Headlines no longer called her a scammer. Instead, they speculated about the unlikely romance that had shaken Chicago's elite. Public opinion remained divided, But for the first time since the scandal broke, Jasmine could breathe. She found Alexander waiting in the penthouse, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights glowing behind him. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, setting her bag down. He turned, his expression unreadable at first, then softening in a way that unraveled her entirely. "I meant every word." Her throat closed. "Why would you risk everything? Your empire, your reputation." "Because none of it matters without you," he said simply. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. He wasn't the ruthless mogul now, nor the man who hid behind contracts and control. He was just Alexander, a man who had been broken once, and who was choosing to love again, choosing her. Jasmine's chest ached, her heart pulling her forward despite every instinct that told her to run. "You make it so hard to trust you," she whispered. "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth it." And before she could stop herself, she closed the distance and kissed him. It was different this time, less desperate, more certain. A seal on a promise, a surrender to something neither of them could fight anymore. For the first time in years, Alexander Pierce smiled fully, without restraint. And for the first time in forever, Jasmine Carter believed that maybe, just maybe, love could be real. The scandal that once threatened to tear them apart faded faster than anyone predicted. 4 weeks, headlines buzzed about Alexander Pierce, the ruthless businessman who had supposedly fallen prey to a scheming gold digger. But as the chaos unfolded, something unexpected happened. People saw how he looked at Jasmine. It wasn't the look of a man trapped in a deal. It was the look of a man utterly, irrevocably in love. And no amount of gossip could erase that. Jasmine's world changed in ways she never imagined. The hospital bills that had weighed on her for years were no longer a shadow looming over her mother's bedside. Her brother, Marcus, thrived in school, no longer carrying the burden of watching his sister fight battles meant for grown-ups. For the first time in years, Jasmine could breathe. But more than financial relief, she had found a home in Alexander's arms. The man who once terrified her with his sharp eyes and colder-than-steel voice had become her anchor, her safe place. He still worked tirelessly, deals, mergers, boardrooms, but now he carried a softness he had never shown before. Jasmine teased him that she had melted the Ice King, and he would roll his eyes, but the quiet smile on his lips always gave him away. Months later, Alexander proposed, not in a grand, staged spectacle, but in the quiet of their shared life. One evening, as the city lights glittered through the windows of his penthouse, he simply took her hand, looked into her eyes, and said, "Jasmine Carter, you were never just a contract. You've always been my choice. Be my forever." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time, Jasmine wasn't afraid of stepping into the unknown. She nodded, whispered yes, and felt the weight of her past slip away. Their wedding was intimate, far from the society page frenzy Alexander's world expected. Jasmine walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, her curls crowned with delicate white roses. Alexander stood waiting, his sharp tuxedo tailored to perfection, but his expression softened in a way only she could bring out of him. When he kissed her, it wasn't just a promise. It was freedom. It was love. It was the breaking of every wall he had built and every fear she had carried. Together, they built a life beyond contracts, beyond money, beyond the expectations of others. Alexander still had his empire, but Jasmine reminded him daily that wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts. It was measured in love, in family, in the way her laughter filled their home. Years later, standing in the backyard of their summer house in the Hamptons, Jasmine watched their daughter toddle across the grass while Alexander trailed behind her with exaggerated slowness, pretending to lose every chase. Jasmine laughed, shaking her head. The man once feared in boardrooms was now utterly defeated by a giggling 2-year-old. And she wouldn't trade it for the world. The truth was simple. Jasmine had entered his life through a deal. But love had rewritten their story. What began as a contract became a commitment neither of them could imagine living without. Jasmine often thought back to that night at the gala, the moment she caught his eye under the chandelier lights. She hadn't known it then, but her life was about to change forever. Not because she signed a piece of paper, but because fate had brought her to a man who, beneath all his power, was searching for something real. Now, years later, she knew she had found it. Not a contract. Not a performance. Beloved. Messy, beautiful, all-consuming love. Forever.